All right, folks, we are back here on WLTH 1370 AM. Ow! Love Cameo. My main man, Larry Blackman. Happy to him. Glad to see that he is still around, alive and kicking. I think they're still performing, too, if I'm not mistaken. So you might be able to see Cameo at some point. Just want to remind you guys to come out tomorrow to Brunswick at 10 o'clock. We will be having a nature hike. It's free. There will be refreshments. You can bring your kids. It's really just about getting people out of the house. COVID really did a lot of damage. Really did a lot of damage to us community-wise. It really did. And a lot of people got out of the habit of walking. I know I used to walk every evening before COVID. When COVID hit and I was stuck in the house, I ended up having to just start using the treadmill, which, I mean, to me is not the same. It's not the same, but it is at least something. But there's nothing better than walking outside. Really isn't. Getting some fresh air when you walk. So tomorrow, 10 a.m., Brunswick Park. Not the National Park, no. Thanks again to our partners at the Field Museum, the Nature Conservancy, the City of Gary, and the Shirley Hines Land Trust, and don't want to forget the Gary Community Partnership. Again, all these people have come together to just celebrate nature, and that's really what it's all about. Let me get this phone call before I get to my last topic. Hello, caller. What's up?
Mr. Cannon, how are you today, sir?
It's all good, brother.
I want to get your opinion on something. I hadn't been listening to the show.
Well, what? I got to get to my last topic, bro.
Okay, real quick. With the convention center being built in what's called a TIF zone, that money will revert back to the airport and not to Gary General.
Wait, bro, I got to get to my last topic. But thank you for your call. I got to get to this last topic. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's 7:45, man. That's more of a John Allen question. Yes. But I think it's important to look at this country's history to figure out where we are going. You don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And it is important to understand that really about 195 years ago, this week, we had one of the most important acts that was signed by one of our presidents, destructive acts that happened right here in this country called the Indian Removal Act. How many of you are familiar with the Indian Removal Act? Probably not a lot, because I did not learn much about this at school. But it is important to understand the many times that this country betrayed the native indigenous population and did horrific harm to them, because to this day, Native Americans are literally the poorest people in America. Poorer than black people even. Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is the single poorest place in America. A lot of people don't know that. Native American men are the most likely to be murdered group of people by the police in this country. It's not black men. It's native indigenous men. And we have to understand what set the table for that. And the Indian Removal Act of 1830 was a big part of that. It was a law signed by President Andrew Jackson, who was a genocidal maniac, every bit as much as Adolf Hitler was. He's on the $20 bill right now. But he was every bit the psycho that Adolf Hitler was. He genuinely took it upon himself to try to exterminate the entire native indigenous population. He was the Benjamin Netanyahu of his era. He was that kind of monster. He really was. Fully American. With this act, he authorized the forced removal of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States to territories west of the Mississippi River, mostly to what is now known as Oklahoma, which is why I still believe, if I'm not mistaken, Oklahoma has the highest percentage of native indigenous people. Always talk about the irony of living in the state of Indiana. I've lived in Indiana my entire life. Indiana literally translates to land of the Indians. And I don't know no damn Indians. Not a one. Now, what happened to them? Well, I think we're going to see. This law aimed to clear land for white settlers and was a huge driver in what was known as the Trail of Tears, which was a brutal, brutal forced migration of native indigenous people. Now, the purpose of the Indian Removal Act, it allowed the federal government to negotiate treaties with Native American tribes, ostensibly for voluntary land secessions. But in practice, it actually facilitated coerced removals. So once again, they stick their hand out in friendship, and then they yank it back and say, pull the blicky out, the gun out, and say, well, either lay down or get laid down. We're robbing you here. It was driven by the desire of fertile southeastern lands in Georgia, in Alabama, and Mississippi. A lot of people don't really understand how deep the native indigenous roots in those types of places are and were. But a lot of our ancestors who came from Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, okay, a lot of us have native indigenous in us for that reason. The act also granted the president the authority to exchange lands west of the Mississippi for native lands in the east. They said they would compensate them, but they lied. They lied. These laws primarily affected the 5 civilized tribes: the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Creek, and the Muskogee, and the Seminoles, who had established many sophisticated societies, including with agriculture, written languages, and in some cases, the adoption of government and economies. These forced removals started in 1830 and lasted for 20 years, where approximately 60,000 native indigenous people were forcibly removed. The Cherokee removal in 1938 and 1939, known as the Trail of Tears, was particularly brutal, with an estimated 4,000 to 8,000 Cherokee people dying due to disease, starvation, and the horrific conditions during the 1,000-mile journey. It was 1,000 miles they forced those people to walk. Yeah, they didn't take them in a car. They had to walk. Some of these tribes resisted. The Seminoles fought in the Second Seminole War, and the Cherokee pursued legal challenges. But President Andrew Jackson, much like Trump, said he did not care about any court rulings. Treaties like the Treaty of New Echota, were often signed by unrepresentative factions of tribes under duress, which led to widespread native opposition, but there was not a whole lot they could do. Now, what was the effects of this? This basically allowed for the expansion of white settlement and the cotton economy. States like Georgia and Alabama saw huge population growths. It decimated native indigenous societies. These forced relocations ended up having really a genocidal effect on native indigenous people. There were high mortality rates, and these survivors faced hardship in these new lands. I mean, these people had never been to Oklahoma before. They were in Mississippi. They were over 1,000 miles away. You know, these tribes lost their sacred lands. All the community cohesion was broken. Their access to resources, they lost their schools, their churches. And it basically set a precedent that basically anything we did to Native indigenous people could be justified. And that's why you don't see too many Native Americans walking around here in the city of Gary, Indiana. Not too many Indians in the land of Indians. Obviously, it is a moral failure in the history of America. This is something that we will reckon with, and will hopefully will at some point try to atone for in the future. Just like I support reparations for legacy Black Americans, I support restitution or reparations or even land back for Native indigenous people as well. The long-term impact was economic growth for white America. What else is new? They stole it fair and square, folks. They stole it fair and square. And these are the same people, like Martin Luther King said, who will lecture you about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. These are those very same people. After perpetuating barbaric acts like that, decimating whole generations, whole communities full of people, they will look you in the eye and say that you're a savage, that you're uncivilized. Again, that's why it's important to not celebrate these events, but to remember them and to push forward towards justice, hopefully for indigenous people, for legacy Black Americans as well. We all deserve justice here in the supposed land of the free. I don't know about that. You know what I'm saying?